Welcome class, and for this week, which I call it the clash of cultures, not the clash between the indigenous, the Aztecs and the Spanish. No, this is a different type of clash. And remember, through colonial times, the indigenous mixed with the Spanish and also blacks and gave birth to all these ethnic groups. But we are going to talk about the Mexican independence that really have a lot to do with the caste system. A lot of the criollos who were the sons and daughters of the Spanish European born in the Americas, they felt that they were very oppressed by the Spanish rule. And the reality is that the emergence of the modern states of Mexico between 1810 all the way up to 1825, not only Mexico, throughout Latin America, came through a domino-like sets of events. We had the French Revolution, we have the U.S. independence that was closely watched by the Latin American elite. And when I talk about the Latin American elite, I'm referring to the criollos, those who were on top, those who were the hacendados, those who owned all the land, but at the same time, they were not happy with the Spanish rule or the monarchy. So having this new flow of ideas coming from Europe, and this is done through the Enlightenment movement, like John Locke, Jacques Rousseau, Voltaire, all these great philosophers that were talking about moving away from the monarchy. And it really challenged the divine rights of king to hold political power, and they were excellent motivators for most of the American nations to move away and declare the independence from Spain. This week we'll cover that really briefly. We're going to do that in a 101 if you ever take the 102. But I talk about the clash of cultures because by the time Mexico finally breaks away from Spain and Mexico becomes its independent country and inherit all the land, that really vast land from the north, the entire southwest was part of Mexico, all the way down to Guatemala. And then later on, there were a lot of disruptions where Central America fragmented, but Mexico has so much land that Americans wanted to help at one point to colonize and move to Mexico, and that was done through Moses. Moses, and I'm talking about the generation of the Moses family, are the one who went to Mexico to request permission to settle. Mexico at one point did not want to let them come to settle, but Mexico didn't really have any money. Most of the northern frontier was inhabited. Mexicanos were having a hard time fighting the Apaches, the Comanches, especially small towns like San Antonio. So it was a good idea to let all these Anglo colonizers to come and help build Mexico in the northern frontier. But that really backfired for Mexico, and that's the part that I talk about, the clash of cultures. Mexicanos were loyal Catholics. Most of these settlers who came to Texas were Protestant. And if you read, which is going to be extra credit, The Origins of the Anti-Mexican Sentiments by Raymond Paredes, it really deals with this. Most of the clash of cultures at the beginning that took place in Texas in 1821 throughout the 1830s, it was based on religion. Yes, there was a lot of racism too, skin color, and all these funny ideas that the Anglo-Europeans already had against the Mexicanos. So this clash that took place in Texas, because AngloAmericans, when they arrived in Texas, they needed to respect the Mexican laws. And according to the deal or the agreement between Mexico and the Anglo settlers, they were also going to learn how to speak Spanish, and they were going to also become Catholics. And that really, I think, was a no-no, obviously, as I explained it to you, how these two religions, they hated each other. Even the Irish and Germans, when they were actually coming to the 13 original colonies, there were a lot of laws against these Catholics. So I need to let you know that the hatred based on religion was very intense at that time. The Tejanos are Mexicanos. The Tejanos, as they call themselves, and the Americans start calling themselves Texians. It sort of became kind of like a hybrid culture now. You have the mixing of Tejanos and the Americans. And at one point, Mexico was becoming very afraid that Anglos were outnumbering Mexicanos, and they did. Then by 1830s, you have a very controversial Mexican leader by the name of Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, who was a little bit crazy. He called himself the Napoleon of the West, and then he changed the Constitution of Mexico, and he centralized power. What do I mean by that? It means that most of the states, like the state of Texas, who was attached to the state of Coahuila, will lose its own autonomy, meaning that whatever they wanted to do, they needed to ask permission to the centralized government in Mexico City. And believe me, from Texas to Mexico City back then, where you didn't have any planes, it took more than a month. So most of these Tejanos and the Americans were not really happy about the change of law, and then it really motivated both Anglo-Americans and Tejanos who joined forces. This is the Mexicans and Americans to separate from Mexico, and they really do. Sam Houston defeats Santana, forcing us to sign the famous or infamous Treaty of Velasco, and then Texas becomes an independent republic. Then Americans are hoping that the U.S. is going to annex Texas, but it really takes about 10 years. From 1836 and 1845, that's when the U.S. decides to annex Texas. And the reason why it waited for so long is because of slavery. Remember, slavery was a huge problem in the U.S. Believe it or not, the annexation of Texas is one of the causes of the Civil War that the U.S. ended up having in the late 1800s. But that's all for now. And yes, I guess I spoke more than I should, but you're going to see the rest in your modules. Take care for now, and I'm looking forward to see your discussions. Bye.